Welcome to the Plato Paradigm, a paradigm shift in reading Plato's dialogues. Episode 170, IO 533A to C. IO has just agreed that anyone with a graphike techne, and in this case he's talking about painting, the art of painting, would be able to criticize not just one painter, but all painters. He would be able to say without difficulty what's good and what's bad about any painter and his paintings. This is in contrast to Io's own admission a little earlier that he can criticize Homer. He has lots to say about Homer, but he falls asleep whenever he hears talk about any other poet. Socrates now carries on with a few other examples from different technai. Tide, in andriantopoia ede tinedes hostis perimen daedalutu metionos, epeiutu panopeos, theodorutu samiu, alutinos andriantopoi eugenos peri, denos esti exegestai ha eupepoieken, entitois ton alon andriantopoion ergois, aporeticae nustadze, uc echon hoti epe, maton dia ude tuton heoraca. Well then, in sculpture, have you ever seen anyone who is clever with regard to Daedalus, the son of Metion, or Epeios, the son of Panopeus, or Theodorus of Samos, or any one other sculptor? Have you ever seen anyone who's clever at interpreting the things which he, the one sculptor, has done well, but in the works of the other sculptors is at a loss and nods off and has nothing to say? No, by Zeus, I haven't seen this person. Apart from the insight that Io likes to say no, by Zeus, we see that this example from sculpture brings out even more the strange emphasis Socrates puts on who has the techne. You would think that if the techne of sculpture is under discussion, the question would be about sculptors, but it is actually about someone who can talk about any one sculptor. In other words, someone who isn't a sculptor, presumably, who can, however, talk about the products of one or other sculptor. As one might expect from someone with the techne, he is terrific at talking about the products of one or other sculptor, but what one would not expect of someone with the techne, he cannot talk about the products of any other sculptor. Now this, of course, is a parallel to Io himself, who has said that he is clever, he's terrific at talking about Homer, but nods off and has nothing to say about any other poet. So we're already seeing that if the techne of sculpture is anything to go by, Io has the techne of poetry, the techne which the poets themselves have, and he simply talks about poets, just as this person has the techne of sculpture, but is not himself a sculptor. He simply talks about a sculptor. Does this mean that Plato himself, or even Plato's Socrates himself, thinks that a rhapsode has the techne of poetry, the techne which the poets themselves have? Well, this is not necessarily the case. Socrates is asking Io for his opinion, and all of this is for Io's benefit. It's up to Io to say whether this is what he agrees with or disagrees with. Does Io himself think that he has the techne of the poets or the techne of the rhapsodes? And if he does have the techne of either of those groups, why is it that he can only speak well about Homer and not the other poets? Socrates seems to think that some more examples will help Io. Alamen hosgego oimai, uden aulesege, uden kitharitse, uden kitharodia, ude en rhapsodia ude popot, edes andra hostis perimen Olympu, de nos esti exegestai, e peri Thamyru, e peri Orpheus, e peri Phemiu tu Ithacesiu rhapsodu, peride Ionos tu Ephesiu, apore, kai uk eche sumbalestai hate eu rhapsode kai ha me. And indeed, so I think, you've never seen in flute playing or in, let's say, guitar playing, it's kithara, or in singing with guitar accompaniment, or even in rhapsody. You've never seen a man who is terrific at interpreting about Olympus or about Thamyras or about Orpheus or about Phemius, the rhapsode from Ithaca. But about Io of Ephesus, he is at a loss and is unable to contribute concerning what he, Io, rhapsodes well and what he rhapsodes not well. I'm saying rhapsode as if it's a verb, as it is in the Greek. The examples Socrates has added now are the technai of music making, we could say, flute playing, kithara playing, singing accompanied by the kithara, and rhapsody. Things aren't so simple, however. Socrates picks out for each techne someone proficient at the techne. For the flautists, Socrates chooses Olympus, who's apparently a great flautist. I haven't heard him play, but I presume that is the case. And for kithara playing, Socrates chooses Thamyras, so apparently he was a great kithara player. And for singing, being accompanied by the kithara, we have Orpheus, and we know that Orpheus is a legendary singer who could make even rocks move. It's a wonder that for sculpture, Socrates hadn't chosen Daedalus, whose statues were so good that they moved as well. But that's beside the point. When Socrates comes to rhapsody, he chooses Io, and it looks as though Io is just like the other people picked out by Socrates as great examples of the various technai. However, Socrates also mentions a person. Has Io ever met a man who can talk well and have lots to say about these particular people in these various technai? But, and this is what's strange, Socrates then says, not that this person has difficulty talking about others in those same technai, but about Io in rhapsody. Has Io ever seen anyone who can talk about these people in these various technai, but he has trouble talking about Io in rhapsody? on the face of it, this shouldn't be very problematic because Io is such a great rhapsodist that he knows that everybody can talk about him very well. He's famous, he's popular, he's very good at his job, his profession. He is the greatest rhapsodist alive. So we might expect him to answer without thinking that he hasn't met anyone who would have trouble talking about Io the rhapsodist. But if he does simply affirm that he has never met such a man, he will probably have missed the problems in this complex question. If we go back to the difference between poetry and rhapsody for a moment, we might say that poetry is a first-order techne. The poets are the originators of the poems, but rhapsody is a second-order techne because it exists only because of poetry. If there hadn't been poets, there wouldn't be rhapsody. Rhapsody lives off poetry. The poets themselves aren't expected to talk about the poets themselves, but the rhapsodes are the ones who are expected to interpret the poets. These are the people who talk well about the things which the poets have done well or badly. When it comes to painting, sculpture, playing the flute, playing the kithara, singing, being accompanied by the kithara, these people are not expected to talk about these very people who do these things in the technai. If anyone is to interpret and say who's doing well and in what way they're doing things badly, these people are interpreters and not the flautists, the kithara players, the sculptors, the painters, or the singers. In other words, we would expect a second-order technites, craftsman, to talk about a first-order technites. Now, why would anyone talk about a rhapsode? That would be, in theory, a third-order technites talking about a second-order technites. A rhapsode is second-order. I should emphasize that I still have no idea where the dialogue is going, and this distinction between first order and second order and now third order, technai and technitai, is my distinction for now. I don't promise that I'll still have it at the end of the analysis.